Welcome to Frequency. I'm Jenni Field.
And I'm Chuck Gose. Frequency is your go-to for real talk about comms, culture, and employee experience, beyond the buzzword and straight to what matters. Jenni, this week I am in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, coming from a new podcast setup, of which I shared on LinkedIn a picture of my very rudimentary podcast setup as we're traveling here. I'll get into why I'm in Sioux Falls a little bit later in my freak out. But you shared something with me this week that was a LinkedIn post that was about 5 books every communicator should read. And it was a good list, but part of what we talked about with that was that those books were largely focused on storytelling. And you and I are of the opinion that storytelling is important. We're not going to say that it's not, but there's a lot more to communication than storytelling. So we thought, let's each pull together our own top 5 books that we think every communicator should read. And I'm going to go first so that you have to come up with your own 5 so that there's no duplication. So this is in no particular order. My 5 books that I think every communicator should read. For anyone that knows me, the first one should come as no surprise. Soundtracks by Jon Acuff, I think, is a must-read for anyone in business, but I think Communicators is a great one. The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker is a must-read. Anyone who puts together events, it is going to reframe the importance and the focus of events. The Checklist Manifesto by Atul Gawande. This is critical because it shows how the most high-level professions in the world use checklists for reasons, and there's a purpose to it, and there's an increase in quality from it. It's a great read. Playful Rebellion by Gary Ware, which is all around the importance of play for adults, I think is a great message for communicators. And then also Digital Body Language by Erica Dewan. Another great read about, we always think about our physical body language that we have out there, but what's the digital body language and how we communicate to our peers. So I have Soundtracks, Art of Gathering, Checklist Manifesto, Playful Rebellion, and Digital Body Language. No duplicates, Jenni. What are your 5?
I mean, it's close. It's close. There's 2 on there that I could have picked. But I've gone back to books that I have read probably about 8 years ago, and some that I've read twice, and a few that are a bit more recent. So again, in no particular order. The first one is Busy: How to Thrive in a World of Too Much by Tony Crabb. And I read this when I first set up my consultancy, and it was really helpful to realize how much we can pay attention and how we need to have breaks and how to manage yourself, which I think for anyone in business and communicators is a challenge when there's lots coming at you. The second one is Drive: The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us by Daniel Pink. I've read that twice. Helpful if you're looking at culture and employee engagement. The third is Unleashed: The Unapologetic Leader's Guide to Empowering Everyone Around You by Frances Frey and Anne Morris. That is one of the books that I was giving out when people said they wanted to read more about leadership at Comms Reboot a few years ago. That was the one that they got. The fourth one is Remote Not Distant by my friend Gustavo Rossetti. This is fantastic if you're looking at how to build a culture in a hybrid, remote, on-site world. And there's just some really practical stuff in there about how to do it. And the final one is Leading with Cultural Intelligence by David Livermore. And this was a book that was given to me by Sarah Black, my friend. And it's absolutely fantastic if you're communicating across different cultures and different parts of the world. And I think there's now a second edition. So much broader than just storytelling, but they would be my top 5, which was hard, actually, for me.
I haven't even run this by you, Jenni, but you know what we're going to do?
Okay, what are we going to do?
You don't know because I haven't told you.
I really don't know.
So this is a list of 10 books. We'll include the list in the show notes for anyone that wants to review it. Every week you do a LinkedIn post sort of announcing the episode. If you're listening to this, go into the LinkedIn post and mention whatever book you want and we'll send it to you. The first one to go in and put in that book that you want, we'll send it to you. So
amazing.
I love gifting books.
You do? I'm with you on that.
I love it.
So yeah, so on the frequency post that we do on Monday, say which book you want and then we'll get it out to the
We're
first
only giving
person.
out 10 though, everyone. We're only giving out 10. First person. So
Okay.
I feel like that gives your UK group a little bit of a head start, but we're gonna play it.
We'll
We're
we'll
gonna
work
see
that
how it
out. Yeah, we'll see
comes
how
out.
that plays out. Okay. Okay.
All right,
Good.
Jenny, we've gone through our favorite books. What are the articles you picked for us this week?
So, this week we are going to talk about some insights that I've read from the Gallup book Culture Shock, which I said I would do when we were chatting in last week's episode. So, I have finished that. I've grabbed some insights from that for us to chat about, which again was hard because I could have taken the whole book and talked about it, but I've grabbed a few bits in there for us to discuss. I'm also going to talk about video for internal comms. We're going to talk about the importance of leadership visibility, but we're going to kick off with a discussion about unions and employee relations. Now, last week it was announced in the UK that there would be a strike on the underground, as we call it here, subway in other parts of the world. And this is happening in London. Now, I shared this with my collective team in Redefining Comms because a lot of them are based in the UK, and I thought it was helpful that if you're travelling to London, you might need to know that this is happening. And what followed that was a discussion from people saying this would be a great topic for frequency, for you and Chuck to talk about employee relations from both sides of the pond and how we deal with this situation in HR and communications and business around when this happens. So, in the news story that was reported by the BBC, it says the union claimed transport bosses refused to engage with them over pay, fatigue management, extreme shift patterns, and a reduction in the working week. The response from Transport for London, which is the organisation that runs the underground or the subway, is that they have engaged with the union and they are committed to ensuring colleagues are treated fairly, and as well as offering a 3.4% pay increase in their ongoing pay discussions, they've made progress on a number of commitments made previously. They have said a reduction in the contractual 35-hour working week is neither practical nor affordable. Now, as someone who has worked with unions in the past, I'm very familiar with this he said, she said stuff that plays out in the media. But the question from the collective team, and also I think is worth a discussion here, is does this sort of thing happen over there for you as often as it feels it happens over here? And what is the role, I think, for this, for internal communicators and HR to some degree, but how do we deal with these challenges? And is there a role for internal communicators in this when this sort of situation is happening?
We all have our weird little communication kinks out there. Like those weird little niche things that we're into that maybe other people aren't into. This is one for me, Jenny. Going
Okay.
back to my days of working at General Motors and Rolls-Royce, which are both global organizations, highly unionized, I loved it. I loved working in those environments. I think I hear a lot of people complain about unions, and there's obviously a lot of complaints that can happen. I actually enjoyed being in those environments because the union themselves was often a communication channel for me. And being a part of like the bargaining agreements and labor relations and all of those things, I think added a really unique complexity to comms that I actually enjoyed. So yes, it does happen. It's obviously not in every industry, especially now with tech driving so much of the news. There's really not strikes that are going to happen. But I compare like the tube strikes, like what you're talking about here, very similar to about a couple of years ago in the US, where there was threats of a strike at the ports. So
Okay.
anything coming and going from the US. So there's a it's not just like a company saying we're going to close down for a bit. No, you can't buy a car for a couple weeks. No, this actually impacts the economy, much like a tube
Yeah.
strike probably would,
Yep.
or an airline strike. So yes, absolutely, it does happen. I think it's probably less frequent though than it probably used to because of manufacturing employment coming down and other employment going up, or other, typically I know the US, that's where unions tend to be. There's also a lot of some hospitals, some healthcare, some utilities will have unions. So you do hear about it and it is frequent. I think it's these bigger ones like the tube or the ports, or recently it was Air Canada in Canada where there was threat of a strike. And I know there's times where a government has to step in and it's like, yeah, we hear you. You have the rights to do this, but actually we're going to say you can't because it's too detrimental to the country. I think I see a lot of communicators though running from these challenges where I think there's a lot of great things that can happen. I had so many things both at Rolls-Royce and GM get funded by the union because everything I was doing was targeting toward their employees. So they have pots of money that they can use to provide things to employees, I was happy to reach into those pots and ask for things. And they were usually happy to support it. So I had great relationships with the union as a communicator.
And do you think that's the key? Do you think that's, I talk a lot about relationships, and we talked, I think, in the episode last week about the seat at the table for internal communicators and how that's linked to your influence and relationships. This feels like that's exactly the same situation, that actually as an internal communicator, you have to build those relationships with the union in order to manage that internal communication during some of these crisis situations.
Yeah, I think we have an opportunity to showcase the partnership, and I'm on a very tactical story, which we don't get to in a lot in these episodes. But when I was at GM, I was a plant communicator, so just had about 4 or 5 thousand employees at this factory. And typically, there's always at certain levels, there's always a union counterpart. So if there's a salaried person, there's a union counterpart. And one of my good friends was the head of ergonomics at the plant, so I learned a lot about ergonomics from him. And his union counterpart's name was Butch. And we sort of came up with these characters. We called our ergonomics guy, we called him Ergo Boy, that we came up with this Birch and Ergo Boy. And it was like they were like these superheroes. And they had oversized heads in the newsletter. And it was giving ergonomics advice to people, but it wasn't coming from like this annoying, boring ergonomics type stuff. It was coming from Butch and Ergo Boy. And so it was a fun way to showcase their partnership, and they had fun with it.
Nice.
So
Okay.
therefore it wasn't threatening to employees. So I think there's ways to get very creative and clever with showcasing that union salaried partnership to the employees who are kind of being ruled over by that.
And I think what's key there is bringing the unions into more normal everyday communication. I think that doesn't happen in the UK. Like, in my experience, the unions come in, for a specific need, and then you don't really hear very much. I mean, my HR colleagues might say it's different, but I think that what that example you just gave is much more continuous and part of the organization, which I think is probably the direction to take in order to try and solve that problem, where it feels like they just come in when there's a crisis.
But I love the pomp and circumstance when there's negotiations. I love the fact, like when there was something and there'd be like, okay, here's the union trailer in the parking lot. Here's a salary trailer in the parking lot. The labor teams are meeting in each of their respective spaces. Then they come together at certain times. I just love that, like the rules of it. I just thought that was always so fascinating.
Oh, I love that. Right. The next one I want to talk about is about leadership visibility. So this was an article on inman.com, and it was how Opendoor's CEO's resignation underscores the power of visibility. The article says being visible is not optional. Communications expert Kristen Culver writes, it's fuel for growth, and now it's an existential imperative. The article talks about the lack of visibility from a CEO and how it fueled speculation about performance. Now, having read the article, it doesn't feel that that's necessarily completely true. The article does outline some performance issues with the organisation, which I think therefore link to the reputation and performance from the CEO. But this article, for me, really begs the question about the personal brand of leaders and what this means for those inside and outside the organisation. Because we spend a lot of time working with leadership teams and coaching, advising, supporting them around communication, culture, credibility. But I'm aware of many leaders who don't want to post on LinkedIn, who don't want to be proactive in their media presence, but want to do the sort of bare minimum. But for me, the question is, does this article really help make the case for the need for visibility? Or do we have to accept the fact that time and priorities mean that this always falls to the bottom of the list for leaders?
Yeah, I think the visibility thing, I believe it was the Unily Screen Cloud research that talked about leadership visibility, and that, there's a number of employees that don't know who the CEO is.
Yes.
And a lot of people in the commentary that I was reading, it was more putting that on the shoulders of the employees. Like, how would they not know who the CEO is? I take the opposite point of view. My point is like, shame on you, CEO. You're not out there. You're not visible. Just being the CEO does not make you visible. People aren't now no longer wondering like, well, who is the CEO? Unless you're Ed Bastian, the CEO of Delta. I don't know that I can name a lot of other CEOs. out there
No,
because
that's
it
fair.
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter anymore. But I think it matters to the employees. And I think CEOs just take the assumption that because they're at the top of the pyramid, everybody knows who they are. I agree with you. The article I think is less important than us discussing the overall importance of the visibility of CEOs. I think what you shared, which is like anytime you have a CEO that wants to do the bare minimum, that should be a red flag across many spectrums. Because if they're wanting to do the bare minimum in one area, I'm probably pretty secure they're going to do the bare minimum in other areas as well. And that's not the CEO. I let me finish, please, first, Jenny, before you jump in. I think that there's areas where it's showing that visibility is important, but to me, bare minimum anytime with a CEO is a red flag.
So, in my experience, where I've worked with CEOs who will do the communication when it's necessary. So, they'll do the financial stuff, they'll do that with the media, they'll do that internally. They will stand up at sort of town halls and all of those things. But they're not going to do proactive stuff on something like LinkedIn. And that's what this article was sort of honing in on, was that kind of lack of LinkedIn visibility. And there was some lack of press stuff, but it was the LinkedIn piece for me that made me think, I know a lot of CEOs and senior leaders, C-suite leaders that don't post on LinkedIn at all. And it kind of gave me a bit of the ick about if you're not posting on LinkedIn, then you're not visible, and therefore we're going to assume you're crap. I was like, I'm not really sure how we've made that conclusion, because to your point of, if you're doing the bare minimum over here, then you're probably doing the bare minimum in other places. My experience is that those doing the bare minimum on stuff like the LinkedIn stuff are so focused on organizational success that they are spending all of their time doing that and less time promoting themselves.
I think it's more of just a miss. I don't know that it's a negative for them. I just think it's a miss by not, because there's studies out there that show that the CEOs that are
Mm-hmm.
more visible publicly on social media, there's a big win for the organization. So I don't know why they would be like, oh, we don't need to be successful over there. We'll just take, success somewhere else. Where I think as a company, you should want to be successful in every part of the business. I'm looking at it more, take the LinkedIn out of it. And we know that those visibility things that are out there, I think it's a bit of an ego drive from these leaders that just assume that because they've got a C in front
Yeah.
of their title, that everybody's going to know them and they rule the world. And that's not the case if employees don't even know who the hell you are. Again, going back to a story, when I was at Rolls-Royce, I was in this group of younger professionals that I called them the asterisk kids, like the people that have been like high potential type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And one of our leaders got up to talk, and he was like, "Who is that?" I was like, "That's our VP of quality." Like, I assumed everybody knew Bill, who's our VP of quality. He's like, "Yeah, I had no idea who that guy was." And
Yeah.
this is a high potential. This is pre LinkedIn. This is before any of that. This
Yeah.
is a high potential employee, not even knowing who a VP is at this manufacturing facility. Those are signals out there that I think there's a little bit of ego being like, well,
Mm-hmm.
everybody knows who I am. Like, you should always have the mentality of introducing yourself to people, even if you know people know who you are. There's some humility in introducing yourself. I think that's what's missing from a lot of leaders out there.
Yeah, I definitely think that's the case internally. If you think about sort of those town halls or those big conferences where you might be getting those frontline employees together, and different people from different parts of the organization that don't have that visibility and access to somebody walking the floor that you might have in an office. I think it's always a miss for me on these internal conferences where they just get up and say hi and then they just start talking. And
Right.
it's like, yeah, no one knows who you are. We'll just put it on the slide behind them so that people
Right.
actually know. Right. The next discussion is still in the world of internal comms, about the world of video. So Lexi McCausland posted a question the other day saying, can we have a healthy discussion, in brackets debate, about video for internal comms? Basically asking, is video effective as a communication tool for employees? This was what she wrote on LinkedIn. I'm in an interesting position where I'm responsible for creating internal comms for our division of around 400 people, but I'm also part of a larger organization where I receive internal comms like any other employee. I'm probably exposing myself here. I mean, she is now because we're talking about her, but I almost never watch videos unless they are for mandatory training or something. I think my biggest gripe with video is that it's not searchable. I don't want to sift through 3 minutes to find an answer I can skim on a page in 20 seconds. Am I letting my personal bias get in the way of how effective video could be? Or is video just better suited for specific use cases like a how-to or a quick executive check-in, and not for critical updates or reference info? I loved this post from Lexi because I felt like I was seen. I am not someone that will watch back a webinar if I've signed up to an online event and I don't go. I'm definitely not going to look at it again. I know myself to know that. But the question here for you is, what's your view on video for internal comms? Because I think Lexi makes a great point about that, sifting through the content, the lack of searchability, and also what's your personal preference for watching videos?
I like that she brought up the importance of bias in this, that I have advised other comms teams in the past that because you don't like doing something, you are negatively impacting the experience of
Yeah.
potentially tens or hundreds of thousands. I know in this case it was 400, but the number honestly doesn't matter at that point. When we let our biases dictate how the company communicates, that's could be a massive negative. And I have been critical of this in the past. One organization I worked at, I hated our intranet, and guess what sucked? Our intranet,
Yeah.
because I hated it. Yet other people had to use it. Like there wasn't an alternative to them. So I do think our bias comes into play. I think this is where I think what the sexy word is, like not just omni-channel, but omni-content. Like you're putting content in a variety of different ways for organizations. I mean, I remember going back on a previous podcast that I had, someone came up to me. She's like, "Oh, by the way, I just want you to know, I don't listen to your podcast." And I'm like, "I don't know why you're telling me this." Right. Thank you. But instead she was like, "No, I read it." She's like, "I prefer reading the discussion instead of listening to it." So I'm like, okay, so people are just consuming content in the way they want. So
Mm,
yeah, for some, make it skimmable, make it readable. Great. For others, is video the end all be all? Absolutely not. But are there times where video is helpful for storytelling or demonstrating processes or explaining things in new ways? Absolutely, it is. So it's not a all on one side or all on the other. I think as in this case, in her role as a comms professional, she needs to use her expertise to figure out what is the best medium for this. And maybe it's both. Maybe it's, hey, here's a 30-second, 90-second, however long video, but then below it, here's the text. It doesn't have
mm,
to be one or the other. It can actually be both and give people the choice. And the cool part about that is you get the data on it. If you've got a good system on the back end, you can actually see, okay, how many people click through, which I know is not the important measurement, but let's just say that. Okay, how many people played the video? How long did they watch the video? Did they skip past part of the video? But also then you start to learn like, okay, a 3-minute video maybe isn't the right thing. Like I've seen people
mm.
now do really great financial reports, like when they do their quarterly earnings, do a 60-second summary video. I guarantee you that's better and more accessible by employees than some crazy long internet post with a lot of jargon and gobbledygook that no one understands.
I think it's almost like she's answered her own question in it around saying, is it better suited for specific use cases? And I think that's almost the point, isn't it? That it's got a place, like anything, like an email has
Yep.
a place, like a text message has a place. Video is the same as that. And I think technology has come on so far now that actually having the transcript, having that accessible, having it as audio only, like all the different ways you can repurpose that content makes it so much easier. I think the
Mhm.
thing that is good about video, and even though my preference is not necessarily always to watch it, is that it's the richest form of communication in the sense that you've got audio, video. You can pull so many different things from that, and create shorter clips, and you've got such richness in that that you can repurpose. And I think that's also important to think about, is even if you're thinking, oh, we'll just do an interview with the CEO and we'll write it up as an article, video the interview, and then you've got it to be able to use in lots of different ways, which I think just makes it much better.
Or maybe you're not publishing the entire interview. Maybe it's snippets from the interview that's video,
Yeah,
and oh, by the way, the rest of it's in the commentary below. I think this is where
yeah.
we need to be better, almost learn from our marketing colleagues, be better content producers, and learn of the ways that we can create better engagement with the content or
Mm.
more readership or viewership or whatever it is, and get creative with it.
And what's your personal preference for watching videos? Do you watch them or not so
I
much?
do, and I think it's a lot of it's a lot of the how to. So I was thinking as we've been talking through this, thinking like, what are the videos that I personally will go, and if I need to learn to do something, I will
Hmm.
often watch a video because then it's like pause. I can see
Yes.
what they're wanting to show me. Okay, pause, go do the next step. Okay, come back to the video. So I think as communicators, we need to think about our own, like now in Lex's case, she's saying she only does it when it's mandatory, which might say something about the quality of your videos too, that if you're only doing it. But it's sort of like we talked about this on a previous episode where we talked about it inside ecology as well, where okay, with town halls, like why aren't they like TikTok style videos? Why are they
Yeah.
able to be able to swipe through and watch snippets and quick things and learn what they want to learn? So I think it's video isn't the end all be all. It's not everything needs a video, but to your point, like you said, not everything's an email, not everything's an
Yeah.
internet article, not everything's an SMS. Like get savvy,
Yeah.
start to learn the organization and figure out the best way to share those things.
Get savvy. We're going to hashtag that. Right. The final point for today is the Culture Shock book from Gallup, which I have here in front of me, written by Jim Clifton and Jim Harter. Now, I picked up the audiobook of this a while ago and was listening to it on my walks and then realized there was so much data in it that I couldn't quite keep up. So it's like, I need to just order it so I can sit there with a highlighter. So I did that. I've got some stats to talk about. I am looking at this in a bigger piece, but my brain needs a little bit more quiet to make sense of that. But I've got lots of thoughts about internal comms and employee engagement. And this book has just reinforced for me the fact that never the two should be confused. But these are the stats I wanted to share for the purpose of our conversation. So 70% of the variance in team engagement is determined by just the manager. What differentiates a great manager from an average one is that they are experts at putting people in roles that use their natural strengths. Now, strengths comes up a lot in the book. I'm not sure if it's just because Jim Clifton partly wrote it, but it comes up a lot as being a key to unlocking engagement. You align employees to their strengths and things will improve dramatically. The next point is the most important habit of a great manager is one meaningful conversation per week with each team member. The book goes on to define what a meaningful conversation is, and it's a conversation that focuses on employees' goals. Discussing goals leads to customer retention, team collaboration, recognition, and well-being. The next point is around the fact that scientific literature suggests that when employees have the freedom to choose when and how they do their work, creativity and innovation increase. The book goes on to say this concept is called task autonomy. Nearly 40% of employees tell Gallup that they would change jobs for the option to work full or part-time from a flexible location. Importantly, that 40% figure hasn't changed since 2016. Despite all of the noise about where we work from. And the final point I want to take from the book is a study that they did in June 2022, where they collected employee engagement and well-being data. And this is about how many days of the week you're working. So those who work 6 days a week had the highest rates of burnout, the lowest percentage of thriving overall well-being, and the highest active disengagement. Those who work 5 days a week had the highest engagement and lowest burnout rates. Those with a 4-day week had the lowest active disengagement, but they did not have significantly higher thriving well-being compared to those who work 5 days a week. And they also reported higher rates of burnout compared with those who work 5 days per week. And I thought that was worth sharing because of the 4-day week discussion that's been going on really since the pandemic, and there's various trials going on. So I don't have a specific question around this, more just I've thrown a load of data at you. And what do you think?
Yeah, I think the part around the 40%, tell Gallup they would change jobs for the option to work full or part-time from a flexible location. I think this goes back to the conversation we keep coming back to time and time again, Jenny, is that people want choice. They want some autonomy in it, and telling employees you've got to be in the office 5 days a week or else is not doing what they think they want to do, or perhaps it is. Maybe this is their
Mm,
way of thinning the herd from people that maybe have options or choices out there. The most meaningful part I think, of this that you shared is the part around the role that managers play. And I think managers, whether you're in HR, comms, engineering, whatever, this applies. And so you have such a critical role that impacts your employees, and how much you truly communicate with them, not at them, not to them, but with them, and ask them questions has such an impact on the employee experience. And I wonder if there are times that managers just don't have the time, or it's rushed because, as we've discussed before, there are no longer just people managers
Yep.
anymore. There are people with jobs who all full-time jobs who then also manage teams, which is a lot to burden on one person. The part around the 6-day, 5-day, 4-day work week thing is interesting because, one, man, 6-day work weeks.
I mean, who's doing that?
Well, you and I probably are in some ways, Jenny,
Fair.
right? So I think there's an element of that, but I think it shows the importance of the amount of time you spend working. We are not creatures who can work 18-hour days, 7
Mm.
days a week. Like that, just the human brain body isn't built for those things. The 4-day versus 5-day with the burnout thing is not, I guess, sort of puzzling and sort of interesting because it doesn't add up. Like the math isn't mathing on it, I guess, and I'm
Mm.
just not quite sure why. So I feel like I need to dig in more to this.
So I have a theory on this, and
I want to
I'm
hear it.
working with a client at the moment who have a 4-day week, which they've been trialing. And I can see I can see how this is playing out. So when you've got a 5-day week, I think it's easier to spread your work over those 5 days. And if you end up with a Friday afternoon where you haven't got any meetings, your work's pretty much done, you're not in an office, you can, sit on the sofa, do whatever, because you're still, in our knowledge worker world, you're contactable, you can do that. Whereas when you're on a 4-day week, there's that pressure to get everything done within those 4 days. So you don't have that grace of space that you can
Mm.
flex into as much, which I think makes it harder. And actually, in the conversations I've had with some of the leadership team in this organization, they are not doing a 4-day week. They are definitely doing 5, if not 6. So the question for me is, when we get to the end of the trial, how are we measuring success and what does that look like? But I think it's the space. I think the 5-day week gives you that room to breathe and to think, whereas the 4-day just feels like I've got to get it done. And then everything feels a bit more intense, is my hypothesis.
I like the theory. I think you might be onto something because as you were talking through that, I was thinking back through the weeks where there is a holiday of sorts or a bank holiday, as you would have. Like all of a sudden, the amount of work you have to get done that week hasn't changed, but you
Yeah.
only now have, in theory, 4 days to get, or only paid for 4 days to get it done.
Yeah.
So there always does feel like that bit of a crunch. So I think I'm going to agree with you on that. I think there is some value to thinking that way. Or is it the 4-day work week, but you couldn't get all the stuff done that you wanted, so you're actually working a 5th day or 6th
Yeah.
day, or even though it's a 4-day, and it kind of bleeds into one another. And it's like, man, we're only supposed to be working 4 days, but I'm still working 5 or 6. And it's some of that
Yeah.
institutional element too that we talked about very early on in the episode of like, what if we change the way we worked? And it's
Mm-hmm.
so weird to even think about, of not that. I think some people probably struggle with it. I've thought about, a bit naive of me, I will say, early on when I started doing the psychology journey, like, oh, I could do a 4-day work week in psychology. Like no one's telling me not to.
Mm-hmm.
I could do 4 days a week. Jenny, I'm doing 6 to 7 because
Yeah.
there's just always something to do
Yeah.
in the business. And it sounds really good, but I think you're right. Maybe it's just that compaction of everything that's adding to that burnout.
Yeah. And I mean, I've always tried to do a 4-day week running, redefining communications. But the reality is that essentially what I tend to do is have my Fridays as meeting free. So I can choose what to do on that day. So I don't like the rigidity of it's a 4-day week, but it means like this week, for example, I've got meetings on Friday. And that's fine because it's kind of balances out with different things going on. But generally, I'll try and keep that as a clear day so I can get stuff done. Because, like you said, there's always stuff to do, and if there wasn't stuff to do, it wouldn't be your job. Is always my argument because
Oh, and I
it's
see you on Instagram having your Fridays at the spa. So yeah,
yeah.
I see those
Yeah,
things
I
happening.
mean,
Yeah.
it was Monday this week here because it was the holiday. So, and I was finishing Culture Shock, to be fair. I was sat by the pool sunbathing with my highlighter like a dork. So yeah, it was good. It was good. Right. That brings us to the end of our articles this week. If you want to know more about the data that's in Culture Shock, then just drop me a note. I'm happy to share some more notes from it. I've got loads I could talk about. But what is your freak out this week, Chuck?
So I began the episode by talking about that I'm in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, which I know a lot of people have not been to, but it is truly a lovely city. And we are here for the third annual Flyover Festival that Ecology hosts. And this is really the first year that I've run the event. The past 2 years, my wife, Kristen, ran the event. In fact, I pointed out to people, Jenny, the first year of Flyover Festival, I wasn't even invited to the event. This is very much a female empowerment. I'm going to do it myself. I don't need you moment for her. So I wasn't even invited to it.
Fair.
Last year I did speak at it. Now this year it was my event. It was Chuck's
Yeah.
version. Bring in Taylor Swift here. It's Chuck's version of Flyover Festival. And it was truly magical. Jenny, we sold out for the first time, and just selling out for us is 40 people. So
Yeah.
this isn't a huge event, and it's never going to be a huge event. It's not meant to be a huge event, but it is growing. And to have it now feel like a family reunion of sorts, that now people have come 3 years in a row and new audiences are coming in. And these aren't just, I shouldn't say just, these aren't communicators like entry level. We had like a VP I went to breakfast with this morning was like, she's like, I'm coming back every year. We had a CIO come to
Nice.
Flyover Festival because she wanted to be a part of it, and communications is important to her. So this is an event for all. Will everybody always want to come? No, because not everybody will. I mean, a lot of times when people are like, Chuck, why the hell are you guys doing this in Sioux Falls? And I was like, why not? You've got to do it somewhere. And everyone that's come here is like, this is such a cool area. It's such a cool city. You're not in some big metro area. There's no massive resort. We walked to a patisserie this morning and we had croissants and
Nice.
coffee. It was a great event to be a part of. And I'm just so grateful for everyone who has supported it over the years as we continue to grow. Alan Oram, our friend over in the UK, came over for this. I think he has now fallen in love with Sioux Falls, and I've told him he's now kind of expected to come back every year. But that's sort of my challenge is, one of my soundtracks is we are not here to do what has already been done. And so next year's Flyover Festival, we will be back in Sioux Falls. We will do it again, but it will feel like a rejuvenated event. It was just such a great feeling. Exhausted afterward. It's a lot of work, but such a great event to lead and be a part of.
Yeah, I love it. I think this is where you and I are so similar with our events, like the joy and buzz that we get of seeing people come together and reuniting. For me, it's Comms Reboot. For you, it's the Flyover Festival. And I just think I can so relate to that feeling you've got today of that sort of, my jug has been full, but I'm exhausted.
Oh.
And it's that balance.
Because you don't, I mean, the morning before the event, I was up at 3 a.m. jotting down notes because your brain is, you're wired in.
Yeah.
You're ready to go. It's on you. You're the host, you're facility,
Yeah.
all of those things. I know you know that feeling, but it's also that, wow, we did something really good. And it was great to be a part of your event in Toronto, to also see you experience that, and for us to have this here this year. And it's going to be something we do every year because it's absolutely the right thing to do.
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it. I'm definitely going to make it to one, whether it's next year, whether it's the year after. I'm definitely coming to one. I just couldn't this year, but I will, because I want to come to Sioux Falls. So my freak out is just really that I'm going on holiday in a couple of weeks. I'm kind of freaking out about how much I need to get done. It's a genuine freak out. So it's one of those, I've had that moment today where it's like a few weeks to go and I need to get a big list out of my head of those. What are the things that I really have to get done before I go? And then what are the things that can wait? And that's always the discipline I try and have when it's a holiday. And then I'm always amazed at how much I can achieve when there is that focus of that time off. So I'm just working through some big client projects and some blogs and some writing and trying to make sense of all this employee engagement data that's swimming around in my head. And I'm looking forward to that quiet of
You should.
being able to
You
think.
should. While we're talking about freakouts, so I want to share something with you that is starting to bleed through a little bit. That at the happy hour, we had a bit informal happy hour after Flyover Festival. There'd been about maybe half the attendees came out to it, and thankfully there were a lot of people that were listening to Frequency. And somebody mentioned, they're like, "Oh, I love how you all sort of talk about like the freak out playing off of Frequency." And I always wonder, like, was that clear for people that we were
Okay,
talking
that's
about like
good.
freak out and Frequency? And people are picking up on it, which is
Okay.
good, because I was sharing with them, like, right now we have zero merch budget out there, right? There's no merchandise for it, but that would be good to do, because I want to do shirts that say like I'm a freak, that's like
Okay.
FREQ, but then like
Yeah.
listener down very quiet down below, so it's like I'm a freak listener, But
Yes.
I told her we don't have the
Nice.
budget yet. We don't have the budget for that, but we'll get there one day.
We don't, but we will. We will.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for this week. Thank you for joining us. All the articles that have inspired this conversation are in the show notes. We'll also put the list of books that we talked about in the show notes. And don't forget to rate and review after you've listened. Subscribe so that you don't miss another episode, and pass this along to someone that you think would enjoy listening or watching, because you can also find us on YouTube. Thank you to Poet Ali for contributing the music to the show, and we'll be back next week with more news, insights and opinions about everything comms and leadership in workplaces today. Keep tuning in and turning up.